It was another extremely bad day for Felix Sater in court today, as far as I can tell. There is something interesting happening, though. He's got a very noisy garbage truck over here with Trump syndrome derangement. I should have waited to begin. But look, they have this dog training facility, the Zoom room. It's an obedience. It has some kind of name for it, but it's about training dogs, or maybe just like leaving them there when you, or maybe it's like a kennel, or I don't know what it is. Anyway, Felix Sater, see, the thing that's weird is he's losing like crazy. And see, all of my assessments, they're just layperson assessments because I'm not an attorney. Look at that poor guy. But they were basically reiterated, buttressed, I don't know what you'd call it. That dude looked like he wasn't part of their party, but he was just sort of occupying the table. What do you do when you're having a nice evening out, having some drinks with friends, and a 400-pound homeless guy sits down next to you? My interpretations of what's going on, I'm not an attorney, I'm a lay person. These statements are just my opinion. I'm not qualified to give anybody legal advice, and you might decide that I don't know what I'm talking about. But today, Felix Sater's defense rested, and we got the summation. And that was good, because I haven't been able to be there every day, so there were certain things that they've been going over, even going back to some of the testimony that I wasn't there for, and then I got to see things that so far have only been presented in court. I don't know if you can see what happens with all the evidence, the exhibits, is that it's not necessarily filed on the docket, so I don't know if we ever get to see that once this all ends. But we had a little bit more cross-examination of Felix Sater in the morning, and he went crazy. People who are following on X might have seen that at the lunch break, I just put out a little tweet. People can go there and see at JG_CSTT. I just put out a post. Look, the police don't even know how to park. That's courtesy, professionalism, or respect, texting while you're parked on the sidewalk. You'd get a ticket for that, but you know, the police, they just want to stand around texting, doing nothing, while the city explodes with crime because they're losers. The thing that's happening, so Sater, he's being really dramatic on the stand, and he's accusing Boies Schiller Flexner of suing him into bankruptcy. He declared bankruptcy. I don't know, the guy's got like Fendi backpack, or what did he have? He had a Toomey backpack, and he's like, oh, it's not that expensive. I can tell you where to get one not that expensive. Maybe if you get a stolen one, but Toomey, that's a premium brand. I mean, if you're bankrupt, why are you buying like $400 backpacks? I don't know. But then I was looking at some article yesterday after court that went into, maybe this was from his divorce or something like that, but somehow they had records in court of his American Express bill, where he had like $50,000 a month American Express bill. I mean, this is a guy who's just running around spending all kinds of money. He's got a house, or at one point had a house in Sands Point, which is, I think, near the Hamptons or something like that. It's expensive as hell, I can tell you that. Nobody broke is living in Sands Point. And there is a video on the internet of Tom Arnold hanging out with, there's a Honda S2000. Those are kind of collectible now. If you've got a club sport one, they're, I think, worth over 100 grand. Can you believe that? I could be wrong about that, but the club sport is pretty desirable. Anyway, Felix Sater has and spends, and just, he's one of these guys who's just burning tons of money. And we spoke yesterday about his testimony about coming to the United States. He said that he was sold for grain. And it is true that Ronald Reagan had some sort of a diplomatic exchange with the Soviet Union, where there was a deal to exchange grain for releasing all these Soviet Jewish dissidents. But there was a couple different releases of these dissidents, and then I think at a certain point the Soviet Union was expelling them. And I mean, again, the story that I've heard about this was coming at me from a Long Island Hebrew school of probably, if you went there now, I mean, all the people who were teaching me stuff are either dead or old, but I'm sure they'd be telling you things that maybe a lot of us would disagree with. And I'm not saying that there weren't Jewish people in the Soviet Union who experienced religious oppression. I think everybody experienced religious oppression in the Soviet Union, because under communism, you weren't allowed to have any religion. But my point is, it's known, well, that's a lot of garbage, that Jews, there was an exodus from the Soviet Union at a certain point. But when I just briefly started looking into this grain getting sent to the Soviet Union, or wheat, that looked like that was Ronald Reagan doing that. And Felix Sater said he came here, he said he was born in 1966 and he came here when he was 6. So that's 1972. Ronald Reagan wasn't the president in 1972, wasn't Nixon? When did Gerald Ford take over? I think 1973 or 4. Right? We've got to look into all this, but we're going to check this Felix Sater timeline. But that was giving me pause. And let's say that's all true. Let's say the grain program started before, but then Ronald Reagan took credit for whatever. He came to the United States through some sort of diplomatic exchange program. He mentioned the SALT Treaty, which was some sort of a nuclear missile reduction treaty, and I think some of these diplomatic things were like a component of that larger treaty. So you can look all that up. But my point is, do we really think that the United States, I mean, maybe they're doing it now, that they're just going to say, okay, yeah, let's take these thousands of people, or even if it's just Felix Sater and his mother and father, we're just going to take these unknown Russian people and bring them into the United States? Is that what they're going to do? Or perhaps is the State Department going to meet with them and figure out what the hell they're all about? Do they have skills? Is there something that this person or this family could do for us? By the way, what the hell happened with the Vindmans? They're going to be probably in this same kind of boat as well. Felix Sater's father, by the way, born in Ukraine. Does that figure into this in any way? I don't know. But the Vindmans are from Ukraine. They also came here. They're also Jewish, came here as exiles from the Soviet Union. And my overall question is, and again, this isn't an allegation, this is speculation about something that seems completely plausible. Don't we think that the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, any of these things are going to say, well, now, hey, wait a minute. We've spent the past, 50 years trying to destroy the Soviet Union, and now we have access to all these people who don't like the Soviet Union and want to come here, and we can give them money and housing and assistance and all this and that. It's going to be a pretty favorable client for cultivating some confidential human informants. By the way, is this so far off the wall? It's what Felix Sater is doing for the past 25 years. So the notion that his father might have done something similar seems plausible to me. And same with the Vindmans. And by the way, if you're the FBI and you connect with Vindman's father or, Felix Sater's father or whatever, by the time you're 6, and people with kids tell me, you're going to know better than me. Look, this is how advanced New York City is. We just have a pipe with some friggin' Home Depot cord coming out of it. Good thing nobody could plug something dangerous into that, short that out and explode something, plug in some sort of electrical whatever. Like, what the hell is going on in New York City? But if I were some super duper spy agency bringing in tons of families from foreign countries, I might say, well, 40-year-old father dude, you can barely speak English. You have an insane Russian accent. Everybody knows you. Maybe you're not that interesting, but we can negotiate with you. This is what I'm going to say. People with kids are going to know better than me. By the time a child is 6, I think you have a pretty good idea of, is this kid smart or stupid? Are they musically inclined? Are they artistic? Are they good at math? Are they reading? Are they funny, smart, talkative? Or is it just some dumb kid sitting there doing nothing? And I will say, I think Felix Sater has a very disrupted moral compass, if he has one at all. That could be a function of growing up from 0 to 6 in communism, or I'm sure it wasn't easy. You know, at some point in the past, I said that there are similarities between Felix Sater and I, and of course you could do that exercise with anybody. We are both male, we have hair, live in New York, but we're actually not that similar at all. I mean, when I was saying that, I was trying to understand him. And what I was getting at is we're similar in that, you know, it's not like he's some kind of mega genius who cured cancer and, you know, he just went to public school. We found out that he dropped out of high school and got a GED so he could go to college. But again, all of this also sounds to me like if somebody went to your parents when you were 6 and said, hey, you know, your fluent in Russian son is of interest to us because in about 12 years, he's going to be an adult, and it's likely that he won't have a Russian accent and he'll be able to speak Russian and English fluently, and we kind of want to cultivate this kid from a very young age to get him into a spy program for the rest of his life. And you can sit here and say, well, that's ridiculous, but Felix Sater wound up in a spy program for most of his life anyway. So now that we're getting some more details from him firsthand about exactly what happened surrounding all of that, none of these ideas are becoming less probable. This hypothesis is being strengthened. So let's talk a bit about what we learned about Felix Sater in court today. Let's see if there's somewhere I can sit without annoying people too much, and we'll talk about it. So I walked in and they had already begun. The jury wasn't there yet, but the judge was, you know, kind of running through with the lawyers. He wants to hear, there's a lot of argument with Snyder, because Snyder basically wanted to introduce all this stuff about Felix Sater being the Russian James Bond to try to play on the sympathy of the jury, and the judge is saying, no, none of that stuff has anything to do with this case. They spoke about how Wolf was trying to protect Felix Sater's identity in the confidentiality agreement, and he didn't copy this guy, Peter Garsky. I found out today that Arcanum was not represented by Latham and Watkins. Arcanum was not the client. The bank was represented by Latham and Watkins. So that raises all kinds of questions about how this guy, Peter Garsky, could have taken over the negotiation. If the bank has hired an attorney, retained a major law firm in the United States, how does Garsky get in there and just take over the negotiation? Remember, he was upset that this confidential assistance agreement wasn't getting signed quickly enough. So what is that circumstance where some random dick from the investigation company takes over the contract negotiation while you still have a lawyer on retainer? I don't understand how that worked. Why did the bank allow that to happen? But that's what they said. And it was Robert Wolf who was dealing with Latham and Watkins, not Felix Sater. So all of this stuff does sound like they're doing tricky things to try to keep Felix Sater's identity away from the bank. They don't want remember, this is all about this company, Litco, which Felix Sater controls. And I think what was going on is Felix Sater has known about, this is my opinion right now. This was not stated in court. Nobody has testified to this. This is me listening to a week or a week and a half worth of testimony, looking at all this different stuff online about Felix Sater, and synthesizing a hypothesis right here. But I believe Felix Sater initiated all this theft of money, integrated all of his money laundering skills. I think he taught the Kazakhs how to launder money, and then at some point the deal went south and he decided he was going to take all the money and figured he's in the United States, they're in Kazakhstan, they can't do anything to him anyway. He's got friends in the Southern District of New York, including judges. So I don't think he really feared a lawsuit. And in fact, some of that was coming through today. And we'll get to that as I go through more of these notes, because I don't understand how you could have a court case going as badly as this one is for Felix Sater, and you could walk into the room at the end of the day laughing and joking with your attorney. Maybe it was today, maybe it was yesterday, but Snyder asked Felix Sater if he's paying Snyder, and the answer was no, he's not paying him anything. So that aligns with Snyder's motion to withdraw, but the judge would not allow Snyder to withdraw. I got to go over that motion to withdraw again. But anyway, right. So in the morning, when they were deliberating with the judge, Snyder had this article from some Italian newspaper or magazine or something like that. We've heard about it before, but this was the first time we, not the parties or whatever, got to see this article, and they had used some certified Italian translator to translate it, and they were just sort of arguing about which aspects of this article they wanted to show. And this is an article that got into the paper because Felix's friend and also a co-defendant in this guy Mendy Moshkin, is that it? Mendel Moshkin, I think the guy's name. Yeah, Moshkin. The Orthodox Jewish guy who I mistook for his rabbi. He's basically, sending emails to Felix saying, "Oh my God, look at this. This is a problem. We have to." They wanted to put out this article because the article was saying that Krapanov's family had been kidnapped and taken back to Kazakhstan, kidnapped from Italy, according to this article and according to Felix Sater. But what we actually heard was that they were arrested by the Italian police because they had counterfeit passports. And they went to court, and the court said, "You're guilty," and they got deported. So they're basically saying that Italy is corrupt. I mean, that might be true, but they didn't present any evidence to support that. They kind of lied about what actually happened. I mean, if they had said, okay, they went to this court and this judge signed a confidential agreement with the guy in 1998 and he admits that he knows him or something like that. I think this lady might be annoyed that I'm talking, but the point of the matter is they just made a blanket statement that this was some sort of corrupt ruling and that they got kidnapped. And this was the moment when Felix Sater started getting crazy on the stand. The really truly weird thing, that's a crazy psycho woman. The really truly weird thing about this Italian letter is that the judge was like beside himself. This is a really nice, the judge seems like a nice man, and I don't often say that about judges, and particularly after sitting in court for a week. The judge usually does something, even if it's not my case, that makes me think, there you go, this judge is a jerk. But Judge Colt has not done that, and I'm frankly amazed. He's got more patience than I do. I would have definitely yelled at Snyder by now. I would have found Felix Sater in contempt of court this afternoon and would have just like ceremonially fined him $100 or something like that and warned him that if he does another outburst like that, he's going to be held overnight in jail. This guy's disappointed that I just sat down on the bench, but that's the way the park works.
Only because you look like you're doing something stupid.
Yeah, well, you're a fucking dick. Why's he got to say that? Looks like I'm doing something stupid. Everybody's got something fucking stupid to say. He had a sad look on his hockey jersey wearing face. We both approached this bench nearly simultaneously. He could have sat there. Fucking asshole. So what we also learned today is that Latham and Watkins did not get fired. They withdrew because whatever was disclosed to Latham and Watkins caused them to withdraw. They said it would be unethical to help Sater, and they signed a confidentiality agreement with Arcanum. And all of that undercuts Sater's claims that they're basically saying that Peter Garci made up this story. Remember, we heard from Felix Sater that Peter Garci wanted to get rid of Latham and Watkins because they wouldn't give him a kickback. See, and that made me think that he had hired them, because that sort of thing has happened to me in LA, where a producer, the guy who lived, this is weird. So I had a townhouse in LA, and basically all my friends knew that I had gotten Spider-Man and 21st Century 3D was doing great, and I got into this townhouse. And a friend of mine sends me a text. He's like, hey man, I'm with I think the Montello brothers was their name. I'm with the Montello brothers, man, and they're looking at renting the townhouse right next to you. And I was like, all right, that's fine. And this guy's name was John. So they rent the thing, but they live in France. And so John is kind of renting it with them, and he's living there when they're not there. And his whole thing is like, strippers love this guy, and it's always weird, like, you know, if you're into like strippers and weird girls, this guy is your guy. But so there was just always tons of girls at this place, and he was just one of these guys who sort of does nothing but go to strip clubs and have girls around and stuff like that. So after Spider-Man, the Montello brothers were like, oh, we want Jason's camera to do our, maybe this was Air Racers or something for IMAX. And so John said, well, you gotta give me $8,000. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you know, I could tell them to go get another producer. So he's basically shaking me down for $8,000. So the notion that somebody would, you know, arrange your company getting hired, it's unethical in any industry, but because we weren't dealing with legal matters, I just paid the guy the $8,000 and went and did the movie. I would have lost the 80 if I didn't do it. And it wasn't a full movie, it was a trailer for the Air Racers thing, and they were just renting the equipment. But anyway, the point of the matter is, Sater told us that Latham and Watkins had been kicked out, and I was left with the impression that Peter Garci was the intelligence agency hired by the bank, and that he was somehow involved in hiring or liaising with the law firm. I had presumed, because all this stuff is happening in the United States and they're in Kazakhstan. I don't know. But what came out today was that Latham and Watkins withdrew and entered into a confidentiality agreement where maybe they said, look, we're not going to go any further with this, but we're going to agree to sign a thing that says we're not going to tell anybody about it or whatever. There's another random abandoned kid. Well, here seems to be his father letting him do whatever he wants to hurt people and himself in the park. So that was quite interesting. Right, and so they're arguing about this Italian news article that says, this is just some Italian journalist, we don't even know who this person, you know, they wrote is their opinion or what. What is this Italian thing? I mean, it's different than saying, hey, you know what? The New York Times wrote an article about whatever. Not that I think the New York Times is any good. Oh, that looks like an Antifa dickhead who recognizes me. Yeah, you know who the fuck I am, stupid. Walk away. Come on closer, dummy. You want a close-up? Get a longer zoom lens. Get the shot. You remember me, right? Yeah, fuck off. See, I got up and now I lost the bench. That's how benches in the park work. So they're arguing about this letter. And obviously the bank doesn't want it coming in because it's got nothing to do with what actually happened. It's just trying to paint Felix Sater as a hero and Ablaziov as a criminal who's kidnapping women and children. Like, Felix Sater gets worked up into a whole frenzy, literally screaming, yelling. The judge had to tell him to stop. He was accusing Boyce Schiller Flexner of suing him into bankruptcy for some ostensibly strategic purpose. It was nuts. And I think it was a put on to just, they've got nothing, right? I think they say, there's a saying that when the facts are in your favor, bang on the facts. When the law is in your favor, bang on the law. When neither are in your favor, bang on the table. And Sater was banging on the table like crazy. And for me, it just made me think he was an idiot. And if I were the judge, I would not have allowed the break, because it gave Sater kind of a lot of time to recompose himself, and he was kind of snapping in that moment. But they were ultimately allowed to bring in a limited portion of this Italian article. And then the judge went on another tirade against Snyder, saying that, like, today is the last day. You've had all this time that you could have brought in this evidence, and why are you bringing this on the last day? And the judge said that it's misleading. So I don't know why he let it in. Oh, no, okay, sorry. No, there was one particular line that he didn't let in. So he let part of the article in, but the line that they wanted to let in, he said was misleading, and they wouldn't let it in. And he said that the summation is beginning today. This thing should have been delivered a long time ago. Snyder has no good reasons for why it hasn't been. I mean, again, they were a mess, you know? These guys are still, their suits look a mess, they look a mess. They're disorganized. It took them a few minutes to get a laptop connected to a screen to put an exhibit on there. And it also came out that this is the first and only exhibit that the defense has put in there. The plaintiffs have had bank records, video depositions, I mean, reams and reams. Their numbers for evidence go into the 400s of pages. So I don't know why there's no evidence from Felix Sater, but Boy, Schiller, Flexner objected to the submission, but they let part of it in anyway. Because the judge had told the parties to deliberate on this and have some back and forth, and then they would settle it, and then they tell the judge what to enter. But that's the thing, they're relying on tricks, last minute stuff. Very bad. Right, so they want to talk about the Blasio Italian article. Judge allows it in as Exhibit 1. And he continues, he tells Sater to not go off on tangents and not tell stories, because the judge also detects that that's what Felix Sater is trying to do. And Snyder's team looks confused. They're running around. They were trying to show exhibits on the screen. Then they said, well, it'd be better to do it with this poster card. Then he asked the plaintiffs if they still have their poster card. They go back into their little room and find it and give it to him. It was just a mess. And the judge was mad. He said, because Snyder is reading the list of all the stuff he wants to go through, and he says, so all of this was supposed to be completed yesterday in good faith?
Yeah, but it's mandatory.
And the judge is sort of calling him out. You get Mr. Fletcher with the TV. Fletcher is the guy who runs the courtroom and looks after the jury. Okay, so Sater is back on the stand, and he said he can't recall exactly when he formed Litco, but it was created before the CAA. As I recall, it was created right before. It seemed to me like he created it maybe within a month of the signing of this thing. And then remember, Peter Garsky was all super, in a hurry. Because I remember looking at that and thinking, oh yeah, General Flynn's brother created his shell company less than 2 years before, maybe within a year or two of when they created their nonprofit. And I remember thinking Felix Sater appears to be doing the same thing, but in much closer time proximity to the signing of this confidential assistance agreement. And he told Wolf that he owned Litco. And in the summation from the plaintiffs, they agreed with me that Robert Wolf said some things that seemed not completely okay. And it was Latham and Watkins was representing Almaty, Kazakhstan. So that's interesting that Peter Garsky seemed to be the one driving the bus on getting rid of Latham and Watkins. There's something going on there. And so Felix said that's why he went to Latham and Watkins, because they were representing Almaty, Kazakhstan. Yeah, see, that's interesting. And then they switched them to Boyes, Schiller, Flexner. Now, why is that? Is it because in lawfare you want to control both attorneys? I'm just realizing this right now. Who is this guy, Peter Garci? We know he works for Arcanum, which is a private intelligence company that seems to be made up of lots of former intelligence people. I couldn't really easily find anything about Peter Garci. Got to look into him a bit more. So that's interesting. So Felix Sater knows that Latham and Watkins is representing the city of Almaty, and he told us today that's why he went to Latham and Watkins, and then shortly after that, Latham and Watkins withdraws because Sater asks them to do something unethical. What did they say about that? Whatever was disclosed to Latham and Watkins, so something was disclosed. It's not that he asked them to do something. He disclosed something, so he's there as like a witness, and they're like, you know what, this witness is out of control. We can't even represent you. So Felix Sater basically shits in the pool over at Latham and Watkins. And then they're with Boyes, Schiller, Flexner, where Hunter Biden used to work, where David Boyes, who Alan Dershowitz described as a friend, and then when he said that on a podcast, he looked like he caught himself saying something that he didn't want to say, because that was like 25 years ago that they worked together on Bush v. Gore, and now he has been primarily his adversary, Gafri v. Dershowitz, etc. So that's interesting. Sater says he told Wolf to tell Latham and Watkins that he owned Litgo, but it gets objected to because we don't know if Wolf actually told them that or not. Told Wolf to tell Latham and Watkins. Yeah, but it never came out if Wolf actually did. So we don't know if the bank knows. We get it that Arcanum knows, and that Wolf knows, and that Peter Garci knows, but did the bank ever find out? Speaking of people who look like their dogs, that guy has the same hairstyle as his dog. It was more apparent from the front. So then they start talking about the release from this confidential assistance agreement, and that applies to Litgo past, present, and future members, anyone coming in at some time in the future, etc. But that doesn't matter because he's fraudulently induced them to sign it, is what we're deliberating about here. And Sater made a mention of his children's trust. See, I found that interesting because I think a way a lot of these desperate criminals work is they figure if by the time they're 50 they can stuff a few $1 million into a trust for their kids. I think there's a lot of rules and laws about maybe you can't get that money once it's in a trust and for somebody else who's an adult. You know, I don't have kids, but I could easily see somebody being motivated. I mean, if he's kind of feels like he's got nothing he can do but be a massive criminal to make a life for his kids. I'm not saying that makes it okay, but maybe we understand his motive. The fact that he mentioned that, it's obviously on his mind. So then he volunteers more about his interest in selling ownership. Right. He was going on this whole story. So this wasn't discussed, but they went into great detail about how this release releases past, present, and future members of Litgo. So what it sounds to me like Felix Sater was attempting to do was to establish this Litgo company that you could just magically buy into, and if you've stolen money from the Kazakhstan bank, from BTA Bank in Kazakhstan, You could just buy into this little investment opportunity and now you can't be sued or prosecuted. Certainly would increase the value of Litco stock, wouldn't it? And by the way, this is everything that Felix Sater is about, coming up with cheating methods to sell people things, stocks, and make it look like this stock is going up because we secretly control the company. He spoke about this when he was at Shearson Lehman or whatever. He was talking about the kind of like the boiler room days of stock market where you'd get some crap company that you control and you'd have hundreds of stockbrokers pitching it to people and you'd drive the price of it up. So he's all about creating these like weird business entities that have unique opportunities for criminals to make money, and I think that's what Litco was. If he could get it indemnified by this confidential assistance agreement, and he also loves confidential agreements, that would be very valuable. Hey, I know this company Litco has only earned $1.2 million last year, but since you stole $900 million from Kazakhstan, become an owner in this, and then now they can't get your money. Or maybe that was his idea. So it was 1994 that he got the appeal bond while he was in Rikers Island. He did a lot of, this is not a mystery, but obviously going to Rikers Island is miserable. And he referred to it as hell, that 3 months there seemed like 30 years. So in 1994, he got the appeal bond and he was released within 48 hours after the bond. So why was he there for 3 months? Why did it take him 3 months to think of that? Did somebody come and visit him in Rikers Island and say, hey, we got a plan for you. We're gonna get an appeal bond going, we're gonna get you an attorney, we're gonna get you out of here, and then you're gonna go to Russia and you're gonna launder money. He said, was it today or last time, that he said that he went to Russia in 1996 to launder money with the encouragement of the US government. I think that was on Friday that he said that. That is remarkable and interesting because it reminds me of a story that somebody else told me where the DEA had him undercover and they granted him the authority to start a money laundering operation. So how does that work? Who is getting injured in the money laundering? Like, do they care about who the collateral damage is when they empower people to do these crimes? Oh, and by the way, they went into some tremendous detail about how money laundering works. It's good to learn about this because I figured some of the things out. So he had a deal. Felix Sater had a deal going with some diamond dealers, he said, in the Diamond District on 42nd Street. And he told us, which, by the way, why don't they go investigate the diamond dealers? He said that these guys go to like Belgium, which I agree. I've seen these super fancy hats on Hasidic guys and their wives getting onto planes. I used to go to Liège, Belgium every year for the International 3D Society Awards, and when they were making money and that was big, they used to pay for me to go to that, and I would speak and win awards and all kinds of things. But every time I would fly to, I guess I flew to Brussels, there would be these Hasidic dudes getting on the plane, and it was just sort of known that they were the diamond dealers. But what Felix Sater said is that these guys buy gigantic uncut diamonds and they want to pay cash for it, and then it gets all cut and made into jewelry on 42nd Street. Somewhere somebody is paying a huge amount of cash. 42nd Street, I believe, is where the cash payments are happening. So I don't know if these guys on the plane could be doing it in cash, because you have to be on the plane and they would know you're a Hasidic guy coming back from Belgium, where's all your cash? So they must not be. I didn't record this, so I took down the notes, and what he was saying is, okay, so he speaks haltingly about meeting an old friend. John Snyder asks him about what happens after he gets released from jail, and he now becomes less confident. He's speaking haltingly about meeting with an old friend from the neighborhood who showed up and said, I think you probably need money, and slapped $50,000 in cash on the table and said, you need to show up for work on Monday. And Felix said he did. And work was stock fraud. So this is now 1994, 1995 time frame. He gets involved. He explains how he got blocks of stock from insiders. So basically criminals, in my opinion, would make up nonsense companies or find bullshit companies, and then they bribed stockbrokers to promote the stock. And these stockbrokers were paid in cash. So he said they needed a large amount of cash, and that was the money laundering part. So there were jewelers on 42nd Street. He said they buy rough diamonds, large diamonds. So I guess the Belgium guys go to Belgium, buy the diamonds, probably wire money to Belgium. You're not, how do you get that diamond? I guess they're just personally, physically transporting it from Belgium to New York City. Yeah, how else would you do it? But so he said that the jewelers on 42nd Street buy the rough diamonds, large diamonds that get cut up, and that they deal in cash, and that money was needed in Europe. This is what he said. So Felix Sater would wire the money to Europe. So there's the Hasidic fancy hat guy on the plane to Belgium. He's like, Felix, we're in Brussels, we need the money. Can you send a wire? So they wire it over, and this is like almost like a Jewish Wahala network, where the guys on 42nd Street know the guy in Belgium, and it's his brother, it's his brother-in-law, he's a Hamish Mensch, he knows Felix, Felix send the money, get the diamond, you bring it, we'll have your money, blah, blah, blah. So they come, and then, so Felix, basically these diamond guys on 42nd Street are dealing in cash. So people come in and buy diamonds with cash, they're just dealing all in cash, and Felix comes and mops up all that cash, and they say, hey, here's $1 million or whatever, go wire $1 million to, you know, Heshy over there in Belgium, and now Sater is square with those guys. The wire is, you know, coming from who knows what, to the European, you know, who's checking all this is the point. People probably just don't even have any idea that it's going on, and so Felix has a large supply of cash. So what this caused me to realize is any business that is purely cash could be one side of this transaction for Felix Sater. So that could be Joe's Pizza, where Charles sees the woman drive up in a Cadillac and leave with a brown paper bag. Or it could be this Chinese-African connection selling stolen Apple headphones and fake Louis Vuitton crap all over the street. So if the FBI is telling people, hey, go money launder, they need a supply of cash. And it would be complicated for the FBI to go to Congress and the Treasury and get people to vote and whether or not we should do this. I think they prefer to just enable criminal operations, take the cash, and then do crap like this with Felix Sater. I don't know if that's what happened. I have not yet proven that in court, but when I see all this evidence in the public domain and I start to connect it, this is what it makes me think is happening. So Sater would wire the money to Europe and pick up the cash on 42nd Street, pay out that cash to, you know, and by the way, you're not just rolling around New York City with $1 million in cash without having a network of, you know, Russian bruisers who are going to kill anybody. Like if somebody just steals this money from Sater, this becomes an episode of The Sopranos where somebody's going to get killed, and whoever's in charge of that gang understands, yeah, you can't rob the money from the Russians, we got a war going on, and then mafia families meet and we want a cut of this, and okay, fine, you can get some of the money laundry from the pizza place, some of the money laundry from the Hasids on 42nd Street or whatever. We see actually that happened on The Sopranos, where they had a need to interface with the Jewish mafia and they had some truce. It just occurred to me, is the Russian mafia the Jewish mafia? Is it like one and the same? Because all the Russian exiles in the 90s were Jews. Prior to the 90s. Prior to the 90s, almost all of the Russian exiles were Jews. Anyway, So Sater says he lost his appeal for the stabbing the guy in the face because his lawyer failed to preserve something in the record. He had a complicated answer that was designed to both satisfy lawyers and make a jury say, oh, whatever, his lawyer screwed up. But I don't think I believe that answer. I think that if you were in Rikers Island and 3 months seemed like 30 years, why didn't you come up with the idea of an appeal bond after 3 days? Or before you went in there? See, it seems to me like that's the kind of thing that a lawyer would think of. Maybe Andrew Weissman. You see, because it's strange to me, lots of times lawyers who criticize me on the internet or in court see what I've written and they're like, oh, haha, Jason did X, Y, and Z, he's so stupid. No, Jason just doesn't know how to be a lawyer, never studied the law. I didn't even know what an appeal bond was until today, or that you could get one. Not that I need one, but what I'm getting at is it's a rather complicated idea for somebody to just come up with. Now, there are a lot of people in jail. Maybe some of them know about appeal bonds and told him that. There could be a lot of ways that Felix Sater found out about the notion of getting an appeal bond, but it was a lot of money too. How did he pay for all that? He just lost his job. Lost his Series 7 license for stabbing the dude in the face. How did he pay for the lawyer and the appeal bond and all that? I don't know, but I bet you Andrew Weissman could have done it. So the lawyer screwed up and he went back to jail in Otisville, which he said was, he avoided hell. So what does that mean? Is that part of the deal with Felix, where they put him in a less bad prison? And maybe it's like, hey, it's prison, but nobody's going to attack you, and you get the internet and the library, and you can see your wife on the weekends, and this is part of the deal. You just have to go there. I don't know why. Maybe it was normal, but 18 months. Oh, no, excuse me. 18 months for stock fraud. 18 months stock. No, he was in jail for 8 months. Okay, right. So he lost his appeal. So right, years went by. So from the time he stabbed the guy until the time he got convicted, I think was a lot of time. And so, right, he had to go back to jail in Otisville. That's what it was. So he was out of jail from Rikers Island, and the guy comes with the 50 grand and says, you got to come to work on Monday. Work is stock fraud. He gets involved in laundering money, so he has cash to pay the brokers, and he's dealing with See, but why does he need cash to pay the brokers? Why can't he just make that a bonus and pay them through the stockbroker company? Hey, you guys sold all this. Because I guess he needed money up front to it, because they're like, hey, this is illegal. And they're like, well, here's cash. And like, okay, we'll do illegal for cash, not illegal for a check. I don't know. But anyway, so from the time that illegal stock fraud thing begins, that's going on for about 18 months. Then he loses the appeal, that he has this appeal bond. So the appeal bond is, you say, hey, I'm filing an appeal, and the appeal bond gets you out of jail while the appeal is pending. So now he's out of jail, and he's waiting for his new trial. So there's 18 months there where he's doing this stock fraud scam, and then he had to go back to Otisville because he lost the appeal because the lawyer screwed up. And so for 8 months of the 18 months, he's in jail in Otisville. And people from the stock company, the stock fraud endeavor, are coming to meet with him in jail. He's running this thing from jail. They asked him, he met with his business partners in the jail and ran the stock fraud from the jail. And he left that stock fraud after he was done with jail and started something called Hyde Park Group. And that struck me as weird. Why the hell is a Russian guy from Brooklyn, why isn't it Prospect Park Group? This sounds British. But then he said that, first of all, he described it as a quasi-investment vehicle. So what does that mean? To me, it seems like I tried to start a company with a friend of mine in the film business who was involved in scheduling a lot of like super top-end movie premieres, like Avengers and all these things, where his company was paid a lot of money to make sure that people did not bootleg the movie. He was getting like big bouncers and infrared glasses to see who had a camera on, or they had all kinds of different ways of detecting and throwing people out. And so I had proposed to him an idea, because 3D was failing. This was towards the end of my time in LA. I had come up with an idea that 3D projection, which was already existing in these theaters, 3D glasses that already existed in these theaters, could be used to protect a 2D movie during a premiere such that people could watch it with the 3D glasses on, but you could not photograph the screen with a video camera, and the glasses would cause the camera to fail. It was actually a very good method for defeating piracy. You couldn't use it in a movie theater where people were paying, because why would I want to watch a 2D movie with 3D glasses on? But everybody who was involved in this endeavor agreed that movie executives and insiders who were going to premieres wouldn't mind wearing the 3D glasses if it meant that they didn't have to relinquish their cell phone. It added a lot of time to the premiere to have a table where everybody had to check in their cell phone, and they would bag it and tag it, and invariably at the end somebody was freaking out that they lost their cell phone, or blah blah blah, or certain people wouldn't go to premieres because they didn't want to relinquish their cell phone. So this was a company that we started. What did we even call it? I don't remember, but we started the company, or we were going to start the company. We got a lawyer. We started the process of, patenting this technology, and that was potentially an investment vehicle, in that we had an idea, we identified a unique market opportunity, that my background in 3D technology, this guy's background as a movie executive, it was like, yeah, this idea makes sense. That's an investment vehicle. Let's say we needed $1 million. What we eventually wanted to do was to take this idea to Technicolor and brand it as a Technicolor thing, because they had some 3D projection technology or something. But the idea was, that's an investment vehicle. If you think this idea could go, and we're two people who don't have the $1 million needed to do whatever we need to do, that's an investment vehicle. But this Hyde Park group, it seemed like a money laundering vehicle is what it seemed like to me. But it was partnered with Lord Charles Spencer Churchill, Lady Diana's, uncle, and Winston Churchill's nephew. So this is like the biggest of the big British fancy people. How does this guy, who's a bullshit stockbroker with a pump and dump, friends of mine from high school were working at these kind of things, and some of them got in trouble, by the way. One went to jail. And he wasn't really a friend of mine, just a guy that I was aware of in high school. He was friends with a friend of mine. And it just seems, again, incongruent to me that this slimy dope gets into business with Lord Charles Spencer Churchill. Couldn't that guy get into business with anybody at all that he wants? Why is he getting into business with Felix Sater? So they wanted to do a deal in Russia. This was also screwy as hell. So this is why he got into business with Sater. He says, because Sater could speak Russian. So you can't find anybody who speaks Russian and hasn't been to jail? Wouldn't that be an immediate red flag for some fancy British person? No. Let's find someone from a Russian telecom company. Because what they wanted to do was they wanted to buy or lease, they wanted to make the next IDT. I found it interesting that he mentioned IDT, because isn't IDT somehow associated with Jared Kushner? And I gotta call Lee and talk to Lee about this. For people who have been asking, Lee and I got into a creative disagreement about the direction of the show. We did 2 shows in a row where he insisted on a topic that I did not want. The first one, straight promotion of his Patreon channel, I said, I don't think that's a good idea, because people see it as an infomercial. We should do an interesting show that directs people to Patreon, and he insisted that we do that, and I backed down. Then he wanted to do a show investigating these claims from Thomas Massey about AIPAC being all over, some nonprofit associated with investigating Thomas Massey's claims that AIPAC has representatives that latch on to every congressperson. Well, so I told Lee, I said, you know what, if you want to investigate nonprofits, first of all, I don't want to participate in that because I'm more interested in investigating the nonprofit that paid to have the Palestinian protesters that almost poked my eye out, okay? So I didn't tell Lee, I'm not going to work with you if you continue investigating this. I just told him, I don't want to participate in that. Why don't you do your own show about that and let's select another topic? He would not accept that, and he dug in. And he insisted that I participate in this. And I just told him that I don't want to do any more shows that I perceive as being pro-Hamas, and that I don't mind whatever position he wants to take, but I'm not going to do that. That I felt like he was asking a turkey to help him advertise Thanksgiving. And that after these pro-Palestinian protesters who just took one look at me and decided I was a Zionist who needed to be menaced and assaulted and almost have my eye poked out by somebody who I believe the NYPD put there, I just told Lee I didn't want to participate in that. He started texting me and calling me in a manner that I found bothersome. And I told him that if he insisted on persisting and acting like this, we should just not do the show anymore. And that's it. We haven't really said anything else about it. So I'm not angry with Lee. I haven't kicked Lee off the show. I just don't want to do any more shows that I perceive as supporting Hamas. I don't think the United States should be sending money to any foreign country for any military exercise, but I also think that taking up the position that, oh, you just have to cut off money to Israel, that's not the way that it's going to work, because I've said this before, it is my belief that whatever entity created Zionism is the same entity that created Nazism and the same entity that created Israel and made it the way it is so that it would be a constant fight. And Lee is attempting to draw me into that fight. So I told him I'm not going to do it. If he wants to do a show about IDT and why that's important, I'd be very interested in that. Because as I recall, it's, I think Jared Kushner or his father or somebody related to them owns that, or it's a building in New Jersey or something that had something to do with the theft of Yukos oil. So see, the hypothesis that I am circling around here is that this whole entire court case is a component of a United States deep state plan to financially decimate the former Soviet Union and steal all its assets and resources like oil and money, and to destroy the Bank of Kazakhstan, which they essentially succeeded in doing. And I think Felix Sater is confident that his friends at the FBI, who now seem to control the court, they're the ones who asked him to do it. So he seems remarkably confident that no matter what evidence these guys have, no matter how many exhibits they have to his one, what do you think about that? 490 something exhibits and he only feels the need to have one. I think he's pretty confident that his gal pal Val is going to make sure that nothing bad happens to him. And by the way, how on earth does Jonathan Snyder not know about the connection between Felix Sater and Valerie Caproni? Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He is pretty stupid. Let's presume, I gotta go look at the dates. I believe, so this dust up with the Emmys, it all started in August of 2020. It was, remember August, Adam Sharp makes his complaint with YouTube. And then we have some arguing towards the end of August. It's gonna be like September, I think. As a matter of fact, I think it was September 18th that the lawsuit from the Emmys began. Oh yeah, well, we won't go to the real portal, but I'll sit in front of this picture of the portal so people can imagine a portal. So at some point he tells me he's representing Felix Sater. And the confidential agreement that I didn't know about until 2022 had been released in 2019. I find it hard to imagine that Felix Sater wouldn't tell Snyder about all of this. And certainly Snyder knows about it. He's desperate to introduce all of this into the case here. So when he finds out that Valerie Caproni used to be with the FBI, what a cute dog. He even said to me, oh, you got the FBI judge. We spoke about it a lot. How would he not become concerned? Hey, wait a minute. My client, he was a confidential human informant for the FBI. Is there any, isn't that, how does he not look into that? I just don't believe that Jonathan Snyder did not know about this connection between Sater and the judge. But he says that he wanted to be another IDT. They were negotiating to rent the AT&T cable under the ocean from the United States to Europe. Definitely the FBI isn't interested in that. All of the communications going to Europe in the early 90s. He met Churchill in 1995, and by March 1996, they started the Hyde Park group. Isn't that interesting? Let me think. What's something that everybody wasn't using in 1996? Oh yeah, the internet. Almost nobody was using it. So all this stuff with Prism and 33 Thomas Street and what is that called? Solar wind? Stellar wind? What was the thing that Bill Binney, that also liar, was talking about? The concept of the NSA spying on everything, that doesn't start until the internet. This sounds like Felix Sater was working for his girlfriend Valerie, who's super interested in the FBI going dark. Well, she's not in the FBI yet in 1996. She's a US attorney, but she's pretty close to the FBI because she is the one who in 1996 gets the FBI in control of the TWA explosion, TWA 800. So he's working with that British Lord guy who was involved with Winston. He's the nephew of Winston Churchill. Yeah, it doesn't sound like that guy would be involved with MI6 at all, right? Lady Diana's uncle. And they're trying to rent the AT&T cable going to Europe. So anyway, he gets indicted in 1998. No, sorry. Snyder said indicted. Later, that gets crossed out. He's not indicted. He finds out somehow, doesn't say how, that he's under investigation. So he calls the FBI. He was in England. I don't know about you, but if I found out I was under investigation by the FBI and I was not in the United States, and I had already been to jail, why would you come back? Well, he's got his wife and his daughter, so you would come back. But anyway, he comes back. He calls the FBI. He flew back to Newark, and Special Agent Leo Taddeo picks him up at the airport and drives him to his house. And so Snyder starts going into all these questions that are dancing around the questions that I have already heard the judge tell him that he can't ask. So he's asking like, oh, were you arrested? No. Were you indicted? No, he said no, that he wasn't indicted at that time. And he said that he had brought back an envelope. Felix Sater brought back an envelope. That's objected to. And then while they're objecting and the judge is saying, wait a minute, John Snyder says, what was in the envelope? And the judge says, stop. And Felix Sater yells out a get out of jail free card. And the judge got as angry as he's gotten. Not even what I would call legitimately angry. People who have seen this show have seen me get angry. I get pretty fucking angry. This judge doesn't get like that. But he got as angry as I've seen him get, and he yelled out, stop, called a sidebar, scolded Snyder, like all the other lawyers. You could just tell Snyder was looking straight down at the ground. The judge is talking directly to him, moving his hands a lot. and he was getting yelled at. So then they resume, and Snyder asks if he was sentenced for stock fraud, and he said Judge Leo Glasser sentenced him, which Sater injects, he just turned 100, and the judge is annoyed at him for saying that and reminds him to stop injecting nonsense. And he was indicted in 1998. That's when he's got his his special confidential agreement. But he wasn't sentenced until 2009. And we've got all these letters from Loretta Lynch, and the FBI has him doing all this stuff from 1998 to 2009 that they write about and tell you about. So the question is, what was he doing? In 1996, he's telling us that he's getting involved with this British lord who definitely has nothing to do with MI6, but wants to rent a telephone cable in Now, by the way, the internet did exist in 1996, so the concept of investing in a telephone cable, I don't know, maybe you thought the internet was going to run over the telephone cable. Maybe it was an okay idea, but I don't trust that. So he says he declared bankruptcy 3 months ago. He's paying Snyder $0. He's paying Tom Sema $0. They look remarkably friendly for guys that are getting paid nothing. Now, I could understand a situation where they say, Judge, Felix Sater has no money because he's bankrupt and he can't pay us, and I can't go bankrupt on this case, so I'm going to withdraw. And the judge says no. I don't know what normally happens in a case like that. They just force you to continue working for somebody who has no money. But wouldn't you be annoyed? Don't you think there'd be less conversation, less laughing and joking, and more tension? They're patting each other on the back, they're laughing and joking. Okay? And then Sater, he says he's paying them $0, and then Sater says, is that obvious? And the judge says that's stricken. He's like insulting his own lawyers. Also a weird thing to do unless you have total confidence that you're not going to lose no matter what. Why would you insult your lawyers? And by the way, wouldn't the lawyers be pissed off unless maybe the FBI is paying them? I don't know. So then there's somebody named Alexander Miskovich, introduced Tevfik Arif. These guys introduced Sater to Krapanov. And Miskovich, his nickname is Nazarbayev's wallet. And that Nazarbayev operates through fronts, shills, and intermediaries, and all of this gets objected to. And Krapanov was considered very reputable. By who, though? I don't know. I mean, this is like, if you went, let's say you were in Kazakhstan, and some Kazakhstani company was suing some American person or something like that. This is an amazing outfit. Doesn't seem like something you should just wear. That's not a person from America. That seems like somebody from Russia or Ukraine or something. I haven't seen that kind of outfit in the middle of the day in New York too much. But yeah, I mean, if you were in Kazakhstan and some American lawyer comes up there to testify about you, and it's like, oh, well, this guy supports Trump, and everybody knows Trump is a rapist and a convicted felon and whatever. This is the opinion of whoever. I don't know. Maybe Kazakhstan is great. Maybe Kazakhstan is terrible. I've never been there. I actually asked one of these people who is in the thing from Kazakhstan, is it terrible? And she said, no, not at all. She lives there, and she said she went to college in the United Kingdom and then went back to Kazakhstan. So why would you do that if it was so fundamentally terrible and so corrupt? I mean, I think you could say a lot of the same things about you're telling me the mayor of New York City is not stealing money and doing all kinds of corruption? I don't know, it just doesn't sound that much different than anything else. So then they spoke about how this guy was the Minister of Special Situations, which I don't know what the hell that means. And he was a big insider with Nazarbayev. His wife is the Minister of Television and Radio. That's interesting. That's the propaganda minister. And when you look at the United States through the Kazakhstan lens, that's Adam Sharp. Essentially, we don't have a Minister of Television here, but we have a president and CEO of the Television Academy, don't we? It's interesting. So we worked with Layla and Victor Krapanov on an oil and a coal deal. This is Felix saying he worked with him. Layla Krapanov is independently wealthy, mostly from media. I don't know what that means, independently wealthy. Does that mean that somebody made her the Minister of Television and then she suddenly became wealthy? It might mean that. I think it means that. See, minister in Nazarbayev's thing is like being in the Saudi royal family. I mean, again, look at Nancy Pelosi, look at AOC. You know, she was a bartender or a barista before this. Now she's got a Tesla. She doesn't do videos in her Tesla anymore because people were criticizing her for being too rich, but she's got $14,000 dresses, etc. Felix understood Krapanov made their own investments, and he met with them at their estate at the top of the mountain in the south of France, looking down at Monte Carlo. He said that to indicate how incredibly rich these people are. And it seems like they got that way by stealing money from the former republic, the former Soviet republic. And remember, that whole thing around Yukos Oil, it's Khodorkovsky and Bill Browder working with those oligarchs when they go to denationalize everything and convert it from being owned by the government to being owned by the people. They issue these stock certificates that, according to Lee, Bill Browder and Mikhail Khodorkovsky were pivotal in orchestrating the scheme to steal these, well, to basically buy up the stock certificates from everybody for fractions of pennies on dollars, and then they become all the oligarchs. So was this person Layla, or who is it that's the Minister of Television and Radio? Did they go around and buy the stock certificates from the television and radio company from everybody for a portion of a penny, and now she's in charge of it? It might be. That might be the case. So I need to ask Charles about this, but he's talking about how he created a 521% internal rate of return on this $15 million. This was the mall, I think, the Tri-County Mall. I mean, 521% sounds like an outrageous level of performance for anything. But I mean, if Charles says, no, that can happen with startups when things become successful, they typically have multiples. I don't know, or he might say that's outrageous. You're typically not over 10 to 20% is considered great. That would be weird. I just don't know what an internal rate of return is. So Layla, so what the Krapanovs wanted Felix to do was to sort of take their son, Ilyas, under his wing. Ilyas was born in 1985, and Felix mentored Ilyas in the world of real estate. I don't think so. It was later brought up by the boys' Schiller attorneys that this is essentially a crime family and that Felix was mentoring this kid how to be a money launderer. And so then at a certain point, right, so Felix, he gets them into this Tri-County Mall deal where I understand that better now. So what happened was the mall was in foreclosure. They couldn't, whoever owned the mall couldn't pay the mortgage. So Felix bought that distressed asset, I guess is what you'd call it. He bought the note, he bought the mortgage. And I also need to speak to Charles about this because they bought the note and then sold it to Neil Bush's investment group. No. He bought the note and then Neil Bush's investment group bought the property from a police auction for $45 million, but the note was for 200 and something million. So, I mean, I don't know how all these complicated schemes work, but Bob Bishop will and Charles will. We'll talk to him about that. But so then Ilyas calls his mentor and tells him, oh, we can't give you this money from this Tri-County Mall deal. So then Felix decided he wasn't going to take any more crap from the crapping-offs. They've just been crapping off too much. So he keeps 20 million. And because he created 15 million, and he decided that he should just take the whole thing, and that's rough justice according to him. Well, that's just theft, right? There's other people who I've experienced who've decided, well, I thought I deserved this. Anytime somebody tells me what they think they deserve in a deal, I always think that they've calculated it incorrectly. Like Manny Grossman many times told me, oh, you know, the least you owe me is X, Y, or Z. I don't think I owed him anything. I think I did nothing but help that guy, and then he tried to screw me. But so Felix Sater presumed that this was his money and he just decided to keep it. Nobody created it for me, he said. But I'm sure that's not true. Like somebody, well, I don't know. He's got some screwy way. I don't even know if he believed this, but so he just rounded it up to 20 million. He believed he would get zero and he wasn't going to get paid for the rest of the deal, so he kept all that money. And he's saying that the plaintiffs don't want to pay him either. That's why they brought this lawsuit. Every time he says that, I feel like he's trying. Remember, the jurors are specifically selected to be lay people. Almost never going to see a lawyer on a jury. So if you are a lawyer or somebody who knows a lot about the law, you might think you could be able to trick a jury and you might succeed at that. But I think that's what Felix was trying to do. He's got a lot of experience in court, a lot of experience testifying, and I think he was trying to play this jury. Because every time that he says that the plaintiffs are suing him because they don't want to pay him, I find that to be ridiculous because they're suing him to get back money that he stole and that other people stole. If they didn't want to pay him, they would just not pay him and say, we're in another country, you know, F you. I've had that problem too. When people in other countries don't want to pay you, it's a huge deal. I've had it happen in Switzerland. I've had it happen in Dubai. It almost happened in Panama, but I had something that they needed. And I said, I tell you what, you send me the money and you'll get this. And that worked. But anyway, he doesn't regret taking the money. And Snyder's team can't get the screen to work. Yeah, Enrico Letta is the subject of the article in the Italian press, or maybe the author. Oh yeah. Okay, so Sater asks for a hard copy, and we've been going for less than an hour because Snyder wasted so much money. The judge calls for a sidebar and then an early lunch. So then we're back from the break, and Snyder is late. So he's wasted all this time in the march. Snyder doesn't, there's not a sense of urgency. Like, to me, this is a team that is definitely going to lose, and they're showing up late, they're joking. It seems like a team that is confident that they cannot lose. Like, even with the Boys Schiller people, who, just looking at this, they seem much more organized and poised to win. They're not laughing and joking and showing up late. They're taking this much more seriously. So they're saying after the break that Sater had this article published on July 5th, 2013 in an Italian publication called La Stampa, like the stamp. And Sater says they kidnapped kids, and Ablyazov is what this article is about. Yeah, he's saying that Ablyazov kidnapped Krapanov's wife and daughter. But later it comes out that that's not correct. The Italian police arrested them for having false passports. An Italian court found that they did in fact have false passports, and they got deported back to Kazakhstan. Because that's what happens when you break the law in another sensible country, not this one. So, see, now we're seeing a lot of people who probably have jobs, maybe getting out of work. And then Ilyas called in a panic saying they're going to torture his daughter-in-law. Ilyas? Who's Ilyas's daughter-in-law? Ilyas is the young guy. Daughter-in-law. So let's see. Krapanov. I don't understand that. But anyway, the point is they're saying that they've been kidnapped in Italy, but the facts seem to indicate that they got arrested in Italy, and there's all this nonsense going on with Felix Sater and his friends. So it also says that Felix Sater has met this Nazarbayev, who is, they say the lifelong president and dictator.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. They say the same thing about Putin, and I've seen evidence that that is untrue. I'm not here to defend, Nazarbayev, or I don't know anything about the guy. That could be correct. This is new. We have a Yeti store. So if you need to buy, oh yeah, the cooler people, they should sell Bigfoot in here if you want a Sasquatch. I don't understand why. Yeti, as I recall, sued Mike Moore's son for making some t-shirt with a Yeti on it, or threatened to sue. How come Pelican Case doesn't sue them? Seems like kind of the same thing. Anyway, he said that this was another weird thing that Felix Sater said. He just said, you don't torture women and kids. I learned that in Brooklyn. You don't kidnap women and children. I learned that in Brooklyn a long time ago. I put that in quotes because I also found that to be a remarkable thing to say. What is he talking about? How did he find that out in Brooklyn? I think everybody knows you don't kidnap anybody. So what was he referring to? So just even mentioning Nursultan Nazarbayev gets objected to, and that's because they know the direction that they want to take this in, and that these guys have been, sneaking in these prejudicial comments, knowing that they're going to get objected to. I don't know why the judge hasn't found these guys in contempt of court. In my view, they are just so clearly, here's this ill patio is open again. They're just so clearly violating the judge's orders, violating the rules. I don't know why. I thought Felix Sater was going to be found in contempt of court, $100 fine, and if you do it again, going to put you in jail. I don't know. That would have seemed like he had the opportunity. So that's why Felix got this article written in the Italian news. Snyder gets yelled at for asking something that's already been ruled on. That's with the jury there, I think. What a cute little dog this is. Whoops. Oh, he's so little. He's running away. The phone can't even turn fast enough to catch that little guy. So, Snyder takes another shot. Yeah, it's like he was insistent on getting this in. So Snyder was yelled at for asking about something that's already been ruled on, and then he takes another shot at asking the same question, and the judge calls a sidebar. That was the first time the judge called a sidebar, and Snyder immediately got yelled at. And it seemed like Sater is more on top of the evidence than Snyder, because Snyder puts up a poster board and is asking Felix Sater questions about it, and Sater says, this is the wrong exhibit. We need the second chart showing the 115 million. So Felix Sater is attempting to impeach the testimony of the expert witness who was the forensic accountant who was there on the first day. And, oh yeah, so Mem's lawyer, his name is Mr. Cumble. And you know what? I actually don't have a beef with that guy. I have insulted him saying that he looks sloppy. I mean, that's true. sorry if that's insulting, but he hasn't done anything to me. If you see this, Mr. Cumble, you know, you and I have no issues. You're just trying to do your job. I think your client. Anyway, Cumble, he's representing Mem. And right, so Cumble was the one who was saying to the forensic accountant, I guess there's no there's no forensic accounting school. It's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer where you get a degree in forensic accounting. And so, these assholes who hold Juris Doctor degrees and think that makes them magical or something is looking down at this guy basically. So you have no degree, you took some online course and you just call yourself a forensic accountant. Well, no, I think what happens is the American accounting whatever probably says, if you pass this course, you're certified by us to be a forensic accountant. I mean, that's like being a mechanic who works on BMWs or something. This is your specialty. Maybe you don't have a degree from Harvard in it, but that's what he does. So he was sort of condescending and insulting, but look, whatever. Lawyers are trying to convince you that their guy did or didn't do whatever. So they're just saying that this guy guessed that the money, because the first thing that it shows in the chart is $115 million going in, and they asked him, how do you know this came from the bank? And the guy said, well, banks get their money from depositors. So, because they were originally saying, well, doesn't Ablaziov own 100% of this bank since he killed that guy Tatachev, or had somebody kill him on a hunting trip? That Tatachev guy owned 40% of the voting shares, and Ablaziov owned 60% of the voting shares. So he had the dude killed, according to testimony, on a hunting trip, and then he owned the whole thing. And so what Cumble was getting at is that if he is stealing money from his own company, isn't he just stealing money from himself? And the forensic accountant said no, because the bank is getting its money from depositors and customers and stealing their money. And they said, well, but they, don't they have, can't they get loans? Can't they get investment? And they, well, yes. And so they then took that to say, well, oh, you forensic accountant, you just guessed that it was stolen from the depositors. And the forensic accountant, I mean, he's like dealing with this little small piece of the case. He's not the lawyer who's there to defend every single, he's just like, what? I mean, the bank came to him and said, hey, this money was stolen, go investigate. He doesn't start questioning whether it was or wasn't stolen. And by the way, the bank has a ton of evidence as to why it was stolen. This was just like a sort of a gotcha moment. Again, it might have an impact on the jury. This was the type of thing where they're just trying to confuse the jury, is what it seemed like to me. But they later tell us, they showed us testimony again from, her name was, I think, Nardri, what is her name? That lawyer. The lawyer for the bank, I forget her name, it's a Kazakhstan name, but she said that she was forced to write a letter to the government or the Ministry of Finance or something, explaining that the bank was insolvent and they couldn't pay back the depositors, and they were trying to get Western investment loans from other, they couldn't fulfill their obligations because the money had been stolen. So obviously the money had been stolen from the bank. So all of those things had money stolen from them. Investors, creditors, or investors, creditors, because the bank just totally lost all value. If you could buy stock in that bank and you're an investor and that's how they get money, and then someone steals all the money from the bank and the bank goes under, that doesn't sound good for the investors or the creditors. So they couldn't pay back the creditors. They couldn't give the money back to the depositors. The money was stolen from the bank. That's quite clear. And their whole angle that they were trying to make with Felix Sater was that this guy was just guessing and don't listen to his testimony. And I thought that Mr. Zach, who is another attorney for the bank, another Boies Schiller attorney, he's doing an excellent job on summation. I mean, it's difficult for me to evaluate this because I haven't seen too many of these, but even just comparing it to Snyder and Kumble, Mr. Zach is blowing them away. Like, I'm saying, the difference between watching 5-year-olds play basketball, and you can tell they're playing basketball, but then you go to the Knicks game. This is what this looks like a much more sophisticated game of basketball, even though I don't know how to play. You'll be able to tell. So then Felix goes on this whole ridiculous tirade for the jury where he's saying even if Flagler, that was the forensic accountant, even if Flagler was 5% wrong at the beginning, his conclusion is at least 65% wrong, or it has the possibility of being 65% wrong. And you can't, you can stand up and object, but you can't stand up and say that is just bullshit on its face, which that seems like to me. Like, what is that? Is that some sort of trying to present yourself as some financial guy and here's some sophisticated stuff for you lay people to understand? But anyway, so Kumble basically, he does that. He tries to attack the testimony. Sorry, I forgot this part. So when they get into the part where Felix Sater is talking about money laundering, he's lying about it. He's saying that Kumble is telling you that in order to track the money, he didn't have the serial numbers of all these dollars. How does he know? This is like if you take a penny and put it into one jar of pennies and then that exact same penny into another jar of pennies. How do you know where the penny went? And if you're the jury and you don't hear any other argument, you might say, well, yeah, he's got a point. That's kind of interesting. That could be true. But it's when Mr. Zach gets up there and presents you with, instead of just a dope in a sloppy suit talking and confused about what he's saying, we now have an organized guy with a PowerPoint presentation that even included testimony from earlier that morning. So now we're beginning to understand what a more sophisticated legal team does. There's someone there who's probably transcribing what's being said as it is said, not to be an official record, but just to include it in something like this. I don't see how they could get the transcript from, anytime I've tried to get the transcripts from those people who type it up, they act like you're trying to hire Tom Cruise or something, They've got what you need and it's a lot of money and they're the only one you can get it from. So I think they might have somebody just sitting there typing whatever is being said for their own notes, because he included, he put a picture of Felix Sater and then here's what he said. And so he just pulled out all these key points of testimony, and then he had other things in there where he had video from the different depositions of all these different people he had so much testimony and evidence and depositions from cases from 2018, 2019, testimony from Kropanov, testimony from Ablyazov, testimony from, the wife. He had some of these people who were supposedly owners of the companies, and they're asking them, what does the company do? And I don't know. And they say, is it still in business? And they say, I don't know. It's like, well, you're supposed to be running it. So, again, this is all evidence that these were fake companies that were just assigned to people to send money this way and that. And then now we also know what the fake companies are for. They just want bank accounts that they can move money through. Charles has said that, and I'm sure Charles knows this, because when I tell him, hey, I've just figured this out, he'll say, I already told you that, because I've discovered after years of working with Charles, and I can sometimes fill in the blanks, if he's talking about something that I already know about. Charles speaks at a very high level, and he's used to speaking to people who are smart and know what he's talking about. So when he is telling you something, maybe he doesn't do this on air as much as he does in conversation, because he's presenting, I guess, when he's on air. But there's a certain amount of stuff that he presumes you already know. And if you don't know it, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? But they basically just, in other words, because he's said the purpose of having all these fake names is to just create a bank account. But then he didn't say, because in money laundering, it's important to keep this flow going through all these bank accounts, because then it makes it difficult to track. And I mean, look, I just heard a little bit of testimony about this. I'm not saying I understand every aspect of it, but we're getting some insight into how some of this criminal stuff works. So Cumble basically just said, he's representing, what's the guy's name? Not Moish, what's his name? Mendy Moshkin. That's who Cumble is representing. And he's like, yeah, this guy was basically just a peripheral part of this. He only got a little bit of money, you know, maybe just leave him alone. But Mendel got Bush. He brought Bush into the deal. I don't know how Mendy knows Neil Bush, but Charles has told us that the Bush family is into some screwy deals. And Sater was not involved in flipping the note to avoid fees. Mendel introduced Sater to Neil Bush, and Bush bought the mall. So I don't understand. Yeah, they didn't. That's what they said. They didn't flip the note. They didn't flip the note. Bush bought the mall. So if you own the mortgage that's in default, and then somebody buys the mall for 45 million bucks from the sheriff, what happens to the mortgage? Is Neil Bush paying Felix? It doesn't sound like. I don't know what happened to that note that he bought. But they're explaining he didn't flip the note. The transaction was just introducing Neil Bush, and then Neil Bush's people went to the police auction and bought the thing. Because that was in Ohio. Yeah, Sater. It says Sater got 45 million on the $220 million note. Because the Chinese, right, Neil Bush was involved with some Chinese people who actually wanted to buy the mall. So why would you want 45 million for a $220 million note? How much do you have to pay to get a $220 million note? Maybe 45 million was profit, but I don't understand how that worked. And Meshkin was paid a fee for the introduction. Oh yeah, and then Matthew Lee Russell was in there, but just for a few minutes. He doesn't really, I don't know, he doesn't seem to be covering this too effectively, but then we had the summation from our buddy was that the summation? It's a little complicated, his summation. So basically, I've kind of gone through it in bits and pieces this whole time I've been talking, but he's just bringing up element of evidence after element of evidence, pointing out that this is not even a defense that the defense is putting on, and I agreed with him. He pointed out that they had one exhibit, they have hundreds of exhibits. They're telling you that this guy guessed that the money was stolen from the bank. That is absurd. And I actually even spoke to that woman who is the representative for the bank who said she lived in England. I said, what happened to the bank after all of this? Did it go out of business? And she said, well, it became insolvent and it had to be nationalized. So it basically achieved what, if I'm right, and the goal was to reduce international confidence in financial markets in Kazakhstan, it definitely did that. The bank was taken over by the government, and that's a setback for a country that wants to be, that was communist and everything controlled by the government and then tried to become a fair market. So if my hypothesis is correct, and this was a deep state FBI Felix Sater plan to undermine former Soviet republics, to pillage the former Soviet Union, steal their resources, steal their money, sounds like that's what he was doing. Sounds like that to me. He spoke about freezing orders, this money was frozen. I mean, it's just, there's such an amazing amount of evidence. And then, yes, Sater, oh no, sorry, they were cross-examining. No, we're not up to the summation yet. This is him cross-examining Sater, and he's razzing the attorney, yelling at him, saying, you know, you guys keep suing me. And they asked him, does he recall? He kept saying, I don't recall. And he said, I do recall that you guys were prepping me. And the judge says, stop. Because Felix Sater, I think, is trying to inject lies, in my opinion, to confuse the jury. And I don't know, we're going to see, the judge tells Felix, this is not your opportunity to have a discussion. You need to just answer the questions. There's a lot here. I'm glad I've been observing this trial. I realize it's quite dense for people, but my opinion hasn't changed. It seems like Felix Sater is up to no good, and it seems like he has the assistance of former FBI, maybe current FBI, certainly Valerie Caproni. Certainly he's got his name on a document signed with Andrew Weissman. There's a lot here. But anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're not a sponsor yet, please get on to subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. That's the best way to do it, only $3 a month. You get access to sponsor-exclusive content, great search engine on there. They've got a decentralized platform coming that's going to be very censorship resistant. And it's the largest repository of Crowdsource the Truth videos on the internet. You can also go to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. It's been a